You're listening to Get to Know World of Warships, a podcast created by Boggzy and Synpax.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Get to Know World of Warships. My name is Boggzy. I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Borla. Hello, Borla.
Hey, Boggzy. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay, my man. Thank you for asking. We got some fun stuff going on in World of Warships, in the World of Warships, the warships that exist in the world and every derivative of that. One question for you really is, where's my monkey camo? Where the monkey at?
I don't know. We were promised some Godzilla stuff. We were promised some King Kong stuff. I think it's still on the way, but I don't believe we have a date yet as of today.
I long to reject modernity and return to monkey, and I can't do it yet. I'm frustrated.
I mean, who doesn't want another camo for the North Carolina?
The NorCal is Kong, right? And Godzilla's the Amagi, right?
That's what's going to lure our buddy JGHC back, is the Kong and Godzilla camo. He's a sucker for that stuff.
You think so?
In America, yeah, the Tier 8 battleships, yeah.
Come on, Joe. Come on back. You know you want to. All right. Well, enough trying to get our friends to spend money. So a lot of fun things have been happening lately. We're still waiting for the monkey and the lizard camos to come out. But on top of that, KOTS 12. Oh my god, I almost said KOTS 13, but it's Clan Battle Season 13 and KOTS 12, right?
Yeah, we had a nice opening weekend on Sunday. Got through all of the beginning qualifiers and looking towards group stages this weekend.
That's right. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with KOTS as the more competitive-minded folks are, the King of the Sea is the most prestigious tournament that is available for the World of Warships. It is actually now not just sponsored by Wargaming, as it always has been. It is now owned by Wargaming. It grew so much and was well-respected enough that like we sort of went into with Stats Bloke on our podcast, and Mr. Conway, actually, it's now owned by Wargaming. They bought it. So the qualifying stages happened over the weekend. I am one of the casters. I did that with KSC's Oscons as well. We work as a tag team on that. It's where the large swath of teams duked it out to progress and move up to the group stages, which are the next rounds, which is this coming Saturday and Sunday, the 1st and 2nd of May. Very excited for that. And actually, already, I only managed to cast 5 of the matches, because, of course, there's a whole bunch of casters looking around. Right out of the gate, the very first match I got to witness was extraordinary. And I want to give a shout-out to both of these teams, because they both played really, really well, and there was sort of an unexpected ending, which was the QQ7 team. QQ7 has been on the podcast. We talked with Moose on the Loose, and they went up against a relatively new team called KSA, and KSA is a team made up of partly Clan TKS, the Komodo Syndicate, and partly Red Sky. I'm actually hoping to get them on next week so they can talk about it themselves. But they put up a very, very spirited fight against QQ7, who's a pretty stalwart, highly competitive clan in the North American server, and they took an early advantage, and then they sort of started to lose a ship here, lose a ship there, and it looked like QQ7 was going to walk away with it until literally a kill at the very, very last second, maybe 2-3 seconds away from the end of the game, gave it to them over QQ7, which was a huge surprise, but was well played by both teams. So congratulations to both of them, and I'm looking forward to talking to them next week, hopefully. Did you get a chance to check out any of the other casters, Borla?
Yeah, you know what? Most of the day I spent with my ADHD in full effect. I had multiple screens going. I was watching you and Oscons and what you were doing on one screen. I was paying attention. The Kill Still group has 2 teams in this KOTS. Our KSC team didn't play in the first weekend because we were seeded, but our KSF team played and did really well. They went 4-1 on Sunday and moved on. So I was paying attention to those guys at the same time. Danny Love, Avenger, Floops, they were doing a good job with that. So I'm really looking forward to this coming weekend.
It's Danny Love.
Yeah.
I thought it was like Danny Love.
Well, they don't, the type of English they speak on that little island he lives on, we just kind of, he just runs his mouth in our ear, and we just kind of let it go in one side and out the other. And I think the Yeah, the real master of that show is probably McRendleton, or OnlyFans Torino, as he's known during
Yes, I
the
saw
rest of
that.
COTS. We have some nice joke names going on with that.
Looking forward to seeing the '07 team's joke names as well. They always come up with some cute ones. So, well, yeah, congratulations to your clan KSF, and congratulations to my clan TNG as well. They went 4-1 also. Antonius Jones is in charge of our COTS team, and he's done a lot of hard work. So, best of luck to everybody, not just our own guys. But
Yeah, that's the one thing. I just a quick tidbit for those who
yeah.
haven't done COTS. It's a lot of fun, and if you're casual about it, that first weekend can be fun. It's also a good learning experience to see how much work actually goes into
Oh yeah.
being competitive or being able to move on all the scrims. I think it's a really good experience for people to try at least once.
Yeah, if you like playing this game competitively, or you even want to get to start learning it, COTS happens usually twice a year, and signing up and going through the qualifying stages, it's a great sort of objective. It's a great goal to place in front of yourself and your community and saying, hey, this is for fun for now, but we'd like to start applying ourselves. It's a great way to start. And
if you're in a clan that doesn't have a lot of experience, you'd be surprised at the number of clans who have been around for a while. I know we've done it. I know a lot of the other clans have done it. Help with some scrims for some of the new guys.
Oh yeah.
Just give them some thoughts on how they can do things so that they can be organized for the opening weekend.
Absolutely, and it never hurts to reach out to those clans. By the way, oftentimes, folks are very forthcoming with help and with strategy. I actually ended up helping a clan that went ahead and played in the qualifiers. I spent an hour going over strategies with them, talking about placement and ship types and what's useful and what's not. And I know that '07 and Gaishu's clans have done so for other clans before. They've even mentioned it on the podcast before. It never hurts to ask. The worst that can happen is someone laughs at you, and you know what? That can be taken in stride. So, but we should probably get to the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of our episode here. So. It's been a little while, as you guys may recall, since we've had someone come on and discuss finer play style of a specific ship. We've stuck to community contributors, YouTubers, clans, and whatnot, or even wargaming employees, and we haven't really talked about a specific ship in a while. So I'd like to go ahead and change that and have one of the guys from your clan, Borla, Feuerja from Clan KSD, is going to be talking to us about the Max Immelmann, which has been released recently and is pretty different in terms of how it plays. So please, everybody, say hello to Feuerja. Hello.
Hi. Welcome. Good to be here.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you. I first off, everybody listening, and also to clear the air with Feuerja, I understand that you are a super tester. The rules for super testers about what they can discuss in terms of their experience is different than myself and whatnot. So please, if ever we ask a question that you don't feel comfortable answering or whatnot, feel free to just say so, and we won't go any further than that. Cool?
Perfect.
All right. Any board gaming employees listening, it's not Feuerja's fault. It's my fault. In that case, so part of the reason why we asked you to come on and talk about this was not only are you currently sitting on top of the leaderboard, there's not a whole lot of people on the leaderboards for the Max Immelmann yet because not a whole lot of people have put 80 randoms in, but there are a few, and you're at the top. And I think that once more people show up, the stats that you've been able to put up display pretty clearly that you know what you're doing. And not only that, I understood that you did in fact test it extensively throughout its multiple phases. So I felt pretty confident that you'd be the guy to talk to about how people should go about getting to learn how to play and then optimizing the Max Immelmann. So I guess to start off with, who the hell are you and how did you get involved with Borla's clan?
Oh wow, you want the entire pedigree?
Please.
Yeah. So I I started the game about 4 years ago. It was sort of a pastime that I had in order to keep myself occupied. And there was a moment about 3 years ago. I was one of those guys who I was in a Xian Yang and I went up the middle on two brothers and killed the other CV, and that was Titan, who's now an officer in KSD, and he apparently saw something in that little spark of insanity that made him want to reach out and offer me an invite to his clan at the time, which was WDPS. And we had a small group there. We were, into competitive, but it was one of those things that we'd have 5 people on, and we would be, in the struggle for Typhoon, but really the 2 people that we would use to fill out the group weren't necessarily prepared or really as committed to competitive play as we would have liked. And ultimately we decided that we as a group, and you've met Cable, you've probably met some of the other folks that were actually part of that group.
Cable's been here to talk with us several times, actually.
Yeah. He was part of that overall group. I'm actually I think a lot of us are convinced that Borla accepted the entire group just to get him.
Just to get Cable Guy?
I can neither confirm or deny that accusation.
And then we left WDPS, and there was a couple stops along the path, but we ended up arriving, I think, kind of just when KSD was really hitting its stride and pushing into Typhoon. And so we had an opportunity to really make a contribution there from the outset. And around the same time, you had the CV rework, and then it turns out like, hey, I'm actually kind of good at this. Maybe we shouldn't, drop me into the casual group. And that's kind of where I've been ever since.
And how exactly did you become a filthy CV main?
Well, I mean, you obviously saw my stats. You've probably also, if you took the time to look at them, seen my stats and everything else.
I don't know that I checked that, to be honest with you. I'm terrible.
Okay, well, it was really, if there's one thing that I would say that I'm not particularly good at, it's sustained focus for long periods of time. Borla talked about his ADHD being in full effect. It's pretty much in full effect for me all the time. So having a ship where I don't have to worry about spacing out temporarily and getting dev struck is something that really appeals to me. It's also, I liken it a lot to sort of the sniper play style from a lot of other games, which is generally where it's if you look at all of the other games that I play, that's usually the class that I gravitate towards. And so I think realistically the carrier as a class played a lot to my strengths in terms of like tactical thinking, and less to my weaknesses, which is really precision play and quick twitch instincts, which I don't really have.
Absolutely. Well, yes, I have noticed that you are an exceptionally good carrier player. You are also a good player at other things, but your carrier stats are exceptional, I think is probably an understatement. So, well, we obviously won't ask you to deep dive into too many things today, because we really want to talk about the Max Immelmann. So for everybody who is in the dark, the Max Immelmann, of course, is the new Tier 10 German CV. It's available in the Armory for, I think, 248,000 coal, if I'm not mistaken. It was released in the last couple weeks, and it's characterized by having only 2 types of airplanes, torpedo bombers and skip bombers. And the skip bombers are a completely brand new armament type, which are just hysterical. They're just hilarious. So will you do us a favor and sort of give us a quick overview of how one should approach getting to learn the Max Immelmann? What are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, and sort of how do you begin to get to learn how to use the skip bombs properly?
Yeah, so I hate to start off with the tautology, but the reality is that Immelmann is not FDR, and I think a lot of people in their reviews of the ship have sort of approached it as a comparison to it. Immelmann is a very cerebral CV. I think, both of the, you had mentioned that earlier that there are two, fairly good community contributor reviews of, Immelmann, where they talk about, how it's limited by the requirement that you effectively be broadside to,
Mhm.
to the enemy to get decent damage, and that's not necessarily true. But we can talk, about the intricacies of it later.
Sure.
Um, but the reality is that Immelmann is a ship that will do best if you understand where you need to be before you need to be there, because you're essentially taking advantage of, your team and your ability to create crossfires, as most CVs do, to put the opposing ships in positions where they can't necessarily, and either they go broadside to you and you nail them with skip bombers, or they go broadside to the enemy team and they just get deleted.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. As soon as you get, if you get a DD in open water, yeah, you start to run into issues. But, if you run into a DD as they're making a turn in order to escape detection because they got into cap contest and they're trying to make an escape, then that's an easy 8 to 10,000 damage.
Right.
Right. And it really just, if you're looking at how do I play Immelmann well, it's figuring out, looking at the mini map, understanding where your team is, where they're going, where the enemy team is, where they need to go in order to achieve their objectives, and putting yourself in a position that when, the enemy DD pops up, you're already there.
Okay, so specifically said when the enemy DD pops up. Now, I can say that in my experience, I have in fact smacked DDs with skip bombers, and it's just absolutely hilarious. But it's not a consistent thing. It's difficult to hit DDs with those bombs because oftentimes they will literally jump right over the top. So, what do you think is the most effective use of the skip bombers themselves? Do you find yourself farming BBs? Do you find yourself smacking the sides of cruisers, or do you end up trying to just snipe a DD with them most of the time?
I mean, obviously, I think, especially lightly armored cruisers, something that's hugging an island. But I do, I do want to go to your point, which is, yes, they'll occasionally hop over the enemy DD, but if you have them positioned right and you've anticipated where they're going, I mean, I rarely don't hit one when I make a run on them, and it's usually at least two.
Okay.
And that's something that I was talking, again with Cable, in terms of techniques, how you approach the DD, making sure that you're not necessarily, you're supposed to use the second sort of zone, so to speak, in order to hit them. And that, I think, improves your chances of hitting them quite a bit. But
Right.
I mean, honestly, it's not, even if they go into smoke, I'll usually hit them for 7 to 10k just because they leave
So
their
filthy.
AA on.
Yeah.
Well, quick question on, the reticle for those skip bombs is not really a reticle. It's those lines that go across horizontally that show you where the bombs are supposed to skip. And you mentioned you usually aim for the second one on DDs. Do you aim for the second one or the third one on bigger ships? What's your technique there?
Yeah, so it, the rule is that if you can aim for the third sort of area, then you do so, because one of the primary advantages of Immelmann, and one of the reasons that I'm really keeping a close eye on it for competitive play going forward, is it goes 242 knots. It drops from about 3.5 to 4 kilometers away at full boost. And if you get off a strike, immediately dump all of your speed in the turn and then boost out. By the time you're really taking damage again, you're already about 3 going on 3.5 kilometers away. So if you look at stuff like, blobs of ships in general and randoms, or stuff like Petros in competitive play, the majority of the AA damage is mid-range, which you just miss, right?
Right.
You can dodge fighters as well, but the reality is, if you look at stuff, things even like FDR will occasionally struggle to go up against massed AA because you have to basically get right on top of stuff, and if you have multiple Petros in clan battles cycling defensive fire, you're going to go through a lot of planes really quickly. I'll go up against two Petros and an Austin in randoms, and they're obviously not necessarily coordinating quite as well. But it's amazing for planes with the health that you have, how little damage you'll take if you pull off your strike properly. And then you're talking, especially on some ships with more lightly armored hulls, and not the thick upper belt that something like a Kurfürst has. You're talking 12 to 14k with often 2 to 3 fires.
The fires are a huge part of the damage mechanics of the Immelmann as well. Can you? I know that there's the cycling of the bombers. The 1 strike DCP, 2 strike is a huge part of that. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Honestly, it's not a huge part, and I know that was one of the things that I had a major disagreement with the community contributors. Their reviews of it as a farming boat.
Right.
I would, I went through and I looked at the game, and I'm averaging, today it's probably around 175 to 200,000 damage on the.
That's why the Immelmann's such a PR sync for me. It was because you guys are farming 200k a game.
But on a 200,000 damage game, I'm usually getting about 30,000 damage of that from dots, which is combined fires and floods. The vast majority of my damage is a combination, usually in equal amounts, of just skip bomber alpha and torpedoes. The fires are nice, but that's where I think I come into a disagreement on the classification of Immelmann as a farming ship, because they're not your primary source of damage.
Interesting. Well, that is really interesting, because I of course have been playing it. I'm not as good of a carrier player as others, especially not yourself. So I sort of wrote it off at the beginning. I went, well, the torpedoes are there for direct damage, and even then, only really against large targets like heavy cruisers, your Stalingrads, your Moskvas, and your battleships, because the spread is wide for the torpedoes. They're slow. They're actually akin to Graf Zeppelin torpedoes rather than Manfred von Richthofen torpedoes. If you look at the stats and the numbers on each one, you'll sort of go, oh, that's why these feel so clunky, is because they're essentially Tier 8 torpedoes, I believe, but 4 of them rather than 3.
They're only 35 knots.
Yeah, 35 knots standard. Versus the Richthofens, the Richthofens are faster than that, right?
They're about 50.
Makes a
55,
big difference.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
They did do more. It really depends on if you're talking about now versus later. I think you could get them up to 60 back in the day.
Oh, yikes. Yeah, because that difference right there it's nearly a 40% speed increase over the Immelmann torpedoes. So I find them to be the torpedoes to be mostly something that's just there to, again, force people to turn certain ways, punish them if they don't, and then get the odd flood. But frankly, I never get floods with the torpedoes anyway, even with flooding flags. So I don't know, I'm going into my own experience about it, but I tend to play with the skip bombers as dot farmers, where you find a battleship or a heavy cruiser, you smack it with skip bombers first, which you're almost always guaranteed to fire. It's such an enormously high fire chance with 4 bombs. You're almost always guaranteed 1, and you either let it burn and move on to someone else and light that fire, or if they put it out, you go, great. You turn around, you wait long enough, you hit them with another line of skip bombers, and you get 2, sometimes 3 fires, and then you say, enjoy that, you move on. This is probably why I'm not on the leaderboard, though, is because I tend to sort of just do it that way, where you're saying, hey, this is better used as an actual alpha damage farmer. I know that the skip bombs have 68 millimeters of HE pen, which means they can, for example, penetrate the upper hull of, I believe, just about any cruiser except for the Ager or the Siegfried, which has 90 millimeter upper hull. But yeah, so you really find yourself getting most of your damage from the alpha, huh?
Yeah, and I think the key here is it's it's small, and there's a very limited window of opportunity. But once you sort of get the muscle memory in place to direct where you're aiming the bombs, you stop you stop hitting the lower belt, which is usually where the really thick armor is that you'll get shatters on, and you're really aiming for either the upper belt or the nose and stern,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah.
Because it's on stuff other than stuff like the Kremlin and the GK and the now obviously the Columbus,
Right.
which has that icebreaker hull. If you get 2 or 3 bombs hitting the nose until it'll saturate immediately, but that's a 14,000 damage hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add the fires on top of it, and you end up with I'd say most games, you pick your target right, and 2 minutes in, you're already sitting on 35,000 damage. And the majority of that is just from straight bomb strikes. Generally speaking, especially on the more heavily armored ships like battleships or the heavy cruisers,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually aiming past the ship.
Okay. Good. I'm glad we're getting to this.
Yeah, so at least if I'm going up against something like a Montana, when I released those bombs, generally speaking, the line and just this is something that they didn't do a great job, particularly of explaining
Mm-hmm.
when they came up with the reticle. But if you can picture it in your head, there's a line and then there's 2 vertical lines, right?
On either side of the main part. Yeah.
At those vertical lines are actually the height of the zone that those bombs are going to land in, and you can actually see as that reticle narrows, you'll see them getting shorter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that actually defines where the bombs are going to land.
Okay.
So what you're essentially trying to do is you're putting the horizontal line either at the back of the ship or slightly beyond it, so that when the bombs approach that zone, they're still fairly high up in the air.
Got it.
Um,
So that way they hit the upper hull or the superstructure.
right.
Very good.
And this is, I mean, if I feel like it, occasionally, you get a CV, and you can do about 30,000 damage to them in a minute and a half at the beginning of games if they don't realize you're supposed to start moving at the beginning of the match.
Sure.
But it's very much, if you basically short drop it, you put it right on the middle of the ship, you'll get 2 or 3 shatters and 3,000 damage, and all you're really going to be relying on for your damage is fires. But once you start going past it a little bit and really getting those shots to the upper belt, the first salvo will be 14k. You'll start running into some saturation issues from there, but you'll still be getting 10 to 12 with fires. And yes, it's all AG, right? I mean, we obviously there's a different mechanic for heals for AG. But you can only heal so much, especially since all of your battleships are running Deadeye instead of Emergency Repair Expert.
So one of the things that came up after a podcast, I think about 2 weeks ago, when Boggzy and I were talking about this and the next clan battle season, and we speculated that maybe with the damage that the Immelmann can do to carriers, that people might try to get their battleships in a position to get some early shots in the Immelmann and do some CV sniping. And one of the comments that you made to me after you heard that pod was that we were idiots and didn't know what we were talking about. So is that accurate, or what do you think is going to happen this clan battle season with the Immelmann?
Are we idiots? Come on, fess up.
I mean, not for that reason.
Okay. Hey, wait.
But so it's an interesting, and this was the thing that we actually ran into the last CV season with Richtoffens, right? Which there's a sort of paradox to bringing an Immelmann to CV snipe, which is the one, or I guess the 2 CVs that it's not good at sniping are MVR and another Immelmann.
Oh,
So if
that's
everybody's
interesting.
bringing an Immelmann to CV snipe, suddenly you can't CV snipe anymore.
That's very interesting. I had
Is that
not
because
considered
of
that.
the armor layout? What's the reason why
Yeah,
it's more difficult
so
at the Immelmann?
so the Immelmann, just like the Richthofen, it's based off of a FDG hull. So whereas the the Midway, the FDR, the other CVs have a very low lower belt, and the armor above it's usually very thin.
Like 19 mil for the Midway.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it now in game. The Immelmann has a fairly sizable 175 millimeter armor belt, and then it has a smaller armor belt above it that's 145, and then it has two sort of casemate armor sections right in the midpoint of the ship above that. That's 150, and that goes almost to the top of the deck. And what that means is that if you go after an Immelmann with another Immelmann, you can set your launch point or your attack point pretty far beyond the CV and try and get some hits really right at the top of the hull, right, basically right on top of the armored deck. But you're going to be getting a lot of shatters. And when you're going up against trying to snipe an Immelmann, you're pretty much going to be reduced to using torpedo bombers, which are significantly slower. I think there's something like 206 at full boost as opposed to 242 for the skip bombers, and
Yeah.
and you're really going to be wasting a very significant amount of time at that point trying to take out the other CV while they're probably killing the rest of your
And
team.
stop me if I'm wrong if we've already covered this, but there's a cute trick that I think Feuerja mentioned offhandedly at the very beginning, which is that the Immelmann skip bombers at full boost can drop their bombs a maximum distance of about 4 kilometers away from the target. Which means if, as soon as you drop your bombs, you then hit the brakes and you make a hard turn, you can actually avoid getting inside the automatic patrol fighter's acquisition range for a carrier. So, you can actually see this in a video that the community contributor Oskantz put out. If you check out his YouTube channel, he showed, look, you can literally do this, and the carrier will only ever get sort of continual damage onto your planes, which really doesn't end up being that much. So, that's a major thing of what the Immelmann's capable of doing. But what you're suggesting here is if everyone in clan battles competitively is bringing an Immelmann for the purpose of CV sniping something like an FDR, it's actually not good at CV sniping another Immelmann, and it'll sort of cancel itself out. Is that about right?
Yeah, basically. That said, I've KSX as a group is fairly blessed with a large contingent of filthy CV mains. I talk a lot with Cable about these sorts of things, and I would say, I'm not going to speak for him, but it's my opinion, and my conversations with him have not really done anything to convince me otherwise. That Immelmann is potentially a better competitive CV than FDR for organized competitive play in its own right.
Wow.
The one primary limitation that Immelmann has is on certain maps where there are channels very close together, it doesn't really have an option to do damage.
Because you can't drop down the skip bombs because you need the room.
Right.
That being said, of everybody, the skip bombs, you can actually drop the skip bombs directly onto the target, so they don't even hit the water; they just hit the ship. But I guess the dispersion for the first skip is pretty wide. It's not hitting much beyond like a Kurfürst or some enormous target like that. Would you say that's about right?
Right. Although I should, it's sort of an unrelated note that is potentially it has an impact on clan battles, which is that on smaller islands like Warrior's Path, the island in the middle cap on the A side where you
Yeah.
typically would stick a Holland, it's actually not high enough that it'll deactivate the bouncing, so you can literally drop from the first zone right on top of them.
Oh dear.
And yeah, I was playing this morning against a kid where I did that twice for about 7,000 damage each time. And if you're familiar with a kid, that means no more kid anymore.
Right.
It really, like, even small islands, you can absolutely brutalize things. But on stuff like Warrior's Path, you have the two large islands on the far east side. If something, gets into those channels and stuff, it can become very difficult to hit. But the trade-off there is, if and I think we all know, Petro, especially at the beginning, assuming that there's no bans outright at the beginning or throughout the season, Petro is going to have a very major role in competitive play going forward.
Right.
If you have 2 to 3 Petros in a square, even against something like an FDR with all of its planes, if they all are cycling DFAA, you go through planes very quickly. And in an Immelmann, because you're only worried about the you really don't take flak hits, but you're only really worried about the long range AA, which is significantly lower. I would argue you lose less planes for the damage that you do in an Immelmann than you do in an FDR, and the damage that you do is going to be significantly more consistent.
So your theory, if we're playing fantasy football here, your theory is that the Immelmann is going to be a more effective clan battle carrier than the FDR will be.
I would say that. The other thing, of course, that I would note, and let's not pretend I haven't been wrong before, is that even if it's not, if we assume the hypothetical, I mean, who's not bringing an FDR day one of the next clan battles season?
Not me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be relegated to the Howland again, I think.
Well, you enjoy that. I think I know where I'm going to end up.
You're going to end up on my shit list. That's where you're going to be.
But if there are bans, both from a standpoint, last season we saw, they did the Mogador limitation in part because of its popularity in terms of the higher tier play at,
right.
the people that got to Typhoon early and were pushing for Hurricane. There were a lot of Mogadors there, but also I think in large part because there was a general outcry from the people that were participating in clan battles that season that a heavy Mogador comp just isn't fun to play against.
I think it's me. I think at the start of every week and the end of every week, I went on the community contributors Discord and I just wrote in there, please limit Mogadors. Right. Like, it's not fun.
But, if you want to talk about a ship that isn't fun to play against, I mean, what ship is less fun to play against than an FDR is?
I can't think of one. I remember, and I'll give him a shout out, I remember the first season that the FDR was available for clan battles, which I think must have been 11, before the Tier 9. I had been stuck in the Howland, and the first match we ran up against Gaishu's clan, Yikes, or right now I think they're Roxy. Gaishu literally took his FDR, because he was playing the FDR. He parked it on top of my Howland right at as soon as he could. He parked it on top of my Howland so that he was inside the flak range, and he just sat there and circled me. And he never tried to drop. He just sat there and circled. And his guys obviously are excellent players, so they just all started pouring fire onto me, and it took me, it did enough damage that I was much more ineffective for the rest of the game. And I just thought, this is how it's going to be from now on. And
I think it'll be, what Wargaming does with the bans and limitations with CVs compared to last season, we're all assuming that they're going to have bans and limitations. I don't think they've explicitly said that. I think it was good for last season and healthy. Whether they do that with such a limited class of CVs like they did with the battleships, it'll be interesting to see what they do, especially with ships like the FDR and the Immelmann that people spent a ton of resources on very recently, because even though the Georgia and Musashi were resource ships, many people who had those two ships had gotten them quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they felt they got some use out of them. If you just drop down your steel for the FDR because it's been available, 6 months or 7 months, 8 months, something like that,
Too long,
and now can't play it, and can't play it, or the Immelmann, you just drop down your coal,
yeah.
and then 2 weeks in it's limited. I could see some, and there's less choices, right, at CV than there are battleship too.
Right.
But
Well,
it'll be fun to see what happens.
that said, I did have a hypothetical, which is that it is banned. If we talk about that, then the question becomes, okay, FDR is not around. Theoretically, what do you bring that's not an Immelmann, and why is it better than an Immelmann is?
Well, that's a good question, and I mean, I feel like the Richthofen is what specifically changed the, in terms of carrier meta and clan composition. I feel like the first iteration of carriers, it became Venezia and Stalingrad, because the Stalingrad was, had good AA for whatever it was worth, but could cross map early on with range mod, could shoot 23.6 kilometers with accuracy and with penetration. So right out of the gate, because you're seeing ships because of the planes, you're shooting within the first minute of the game across the map. And then the Venezia was brought in to counter that, specifically because it has enormous throw weight with its sap shells. It has the ability to disappear instantly with smoke, and has good rudder shift. So those two sort of became the de facto cruisers to bring, until the Richthofen was introduced with AP rockets. And then because of AP rockets, Stalingrad's out because it's so vulnerable. Venezia was less so, but I feel like the Venezia was phased out because what do you bring what do you bring instead of a Stalingrad? Well, you bring a Petro. Why? Because it's hard to citadel with AP rockets. So it just was this sort of odd, A to B to C to D thing. And then it's like, well, okay, how do you deal with the Petros then? Well, you bring a Goliath, because the Goliath was better than the Venezia at dealing with a Petro. So then it became sort of this Goliath Petro meta. And then the Richthofen still was good enough, except now the bombs are nerfed, so all of a sudden FDR is looking a lot better. And it's like, well, now FDR is looking a lot worse if you're facing an Immelmann, because the Immelmann will kill your FDR. So
That is, yeah.
It's like, what I am interested to see what happens if the Petro is not, or sorry, if the Richthofen is not the go-to carrier. Suddenly you don't need Petros as much as you did before. And if you don't need Petros as much, then suddenly a whole lot of options become more plausible, because you don't have to worry about showing your broadside as much to a carrier that can literally find your broadside no matter what. So, I mean, yikes, man. There's a lot of moving pieces there.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly true. But at the same time, I think, people don't really talk about hack anymore. I think it's large part because it hasn't aged particularly well after the AP dive bomb nerf.
Mm-hmm.
Midway, honestly, if it's not an Immelmann, I think Midway is the one thing that people start to look at. And, and if the question is, why would you bring a Midway instead of an Immelmann? The bombs are kind of the only thing that you sort of look at, but the torps aren't really that much better. The rockets are pretty useless, and skip bombers just give you so much in terms of the ability to attack targets that even HE bombs don't do. So, it's all, as they say, the best laid plans of mice and men. It's obviously everything's going to be different once we finally actually get into the season. But I would say good Immelmann players are going to have a place for them in competitive play going forward. Bad ones are going to be terrible.
So what you're saying is you have job security.
Yeah, it's Either that or my excellent spreadsheet skills.
I feel like everybody in the KS clan family is like, hold on, I've got a spreadsheet for that. You guys are all good at that.
It's basically the clan hobby at this point.
Well,
I mean, I don't do spreadsheets. I just give suggestions for how to properly prepare your meat.
speaking of meat, I hear you're a whiskey guy, but not an American whiskey guy. It's not bad enough to be a CV main. You have to be an anti-American whiskey guy too, Feuerja. Explain yourself right now.
I started off with whiskey. I actually have the first bottle of alcohol that I ever got when I turned 21. It's a bottle of Jack Daniels. I use it to hold my mouthwash.
Nice.
But as with many things in life, you start off on stuff like Jack Daniels and Tennessee whiskey, and then at some point you kind of have to grow up, right?
Fair enough.
And so I have, and don't let Borla convince you otherwise. I've seen his Scotch collection too, and it's pretty sizable. But I have a fairly diverse collection of Scotches, Irish whiskeys. I've been looking at picking up some of the new Taiwanese or Japanese whiskeys that they're developing over there, which are pretty good.
Yeah, they're coming up with a lot now. Especially the Hibikis are really nice.
My Scotch collection is like one shelf out of 7 or 8, so it's not that extensive.
Well, I mean, I think that says a lot about your alcohol consumption habits that you have 7 shelves of alcohol.
Just says a lot about your decorative habits that you have 7 shelves. Who are you? Are they all in one room?
They're within about 6 or 8 feet of me. I probably have 120, 130 bottles.
Oh my god, I would literally be dead. I would be dead.
You can't just like it's not to drink all at once.
But that's the whole purpose of alcohol, isn't it?
One of them you have to drink, and the rest of them are to look at.
Wow. Jeez Louise. Well, all right. So, which one's your favorite? Before we have you sink a ship, which whiskey do you go to as your default when someone says, "What can I get for you?"
I would say, I mean, God, that's hard to pick.
I know. This is where we ask the hard questions on Get to Know World of Warships.
So, and I'm probably gonna botch the name because I'm not Scottish. But my choice is probably the one that I have right now, which is an Ardbeg Corey Vrecken.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very peaty sort of Islay style of Scotch. It kind of has a little bit of a salt tang to it, but in all other respects, it kind of tastes like drinking a whiskey through an oak table.
I have some Corey Vrecken. I have some Corey Vrecken. In fact, it's at the front of my Scotch shelf. That I have 3 different bottles of Ardbeg. And the way I describe it is, it's like drinking a campfire in the best possible way.
Yeah.
I know that sounds bizarre, but that's like when you sit out at night, like on your patio with a fire, like that little sip of that's the best stuff ever.
Yeah, I hear you there. At least Feuerja just said Islay and not Islay. So, as far as I'm concerned, you're just fine in that regard.
And at some point, I will learn how to pronounce Slantia. I might have actually pronounced it right this time, but probably not.
What was it's been a year and a half since it's been a year since I was bartending, but I feel like the one that people most commonly mispronounce that's a relatively common whiskey in the States, or Scotch in the States, was it's not Lafroig. Lagavulin. I used to say Lagavulin all the time, like I'm some sort of Italian mobster, like like it's from The Sopranos, like Lagavulin, but it's Lagavulin, and that one always trips people up.
My brother loves that. That's his favorite Scotch.
It's super smoky, really, really peaty. I remember a girl I dated maybe 6 or 7 years ago. She tried Scotch for the first time with me, and when I was like, "Well, what do you think?" She goes, "This tastes like a Band-Aid." And I said, "What?" She says the smokiness of it. She says this is what the adhesive on a Band-Aid smells like to me. I was like,
Implying that
crap.
she's tasted a Band-Aid.
Right, okay. But I mean, you know how it is, how smell and taste are integrally linked. So you can sort of smell something and know what it tastes like.
Well, I very famously, amongst my friends and family, have effectively no sense of smell.
Really?
So, oh, it's completely gone.
Oh, that's wild.
It's all that sniffing pain as a kid.
Well,
As a kid.
hold on. I got this. Is that how you ended up as a CV main? Oh!
No, that was the bleach.
Oh. So I got to tell you guys that I post these podcasts on, Anchor, obviously, which spreads it to all the podcast mediums. But then I also post it on my YouTube channel because a lot of people prefer to watch things on YouTube. And I got a comment on a previous one, I forget, of a very irate listener who was mad that I was disrespecting CVs and CV players in general. So I'd just like to say this now to everybody. I don't have any problem with CVs or CV players. I'm not a big fan of CVs in competitive, like King of the Sea or clan battles, because I feel like it ends up limiting the options to too hard of a degree. But I don't really care about people playing CVs in clan or in randoms and whatnot. So relax. When I say filthy CV main, I'm saying it in jest. It's all tongue in cheek.
Let me ruin all of the goodwill that you just made here.
Oh, good. Okay, please.
Me and Ash actually have a fairly long on-running debate about basically that point. I have always been of the position, and I know this is going to be a very strange thing for you guys to hear from me, that CVs in their current form with their current mechanics are very much unhealthy for the game, both from the standpoint of people enjoying the game in randoms and in terms of what I would consider to be meaningful competitive play. And I think there's a lot of a very large contingent of folks out there who consider themselves to be CV mains who defend the state of the class, in large part because they do find it easier to play, and they feel that the fact that they do well in it means that they're a good player, when the reality is that it is a fundamentally broken class.
Oh man, I feel like Feuerja may have just made himself a huge swath of allies out there amongst the CV hating crowd. Oh dear.
Well, and that's the funny thing. Even with our group, we've talked about we have a bunch of filthy CV mains, and it's not necessarily out of love for CVs. It's out of the reality that if we're going to be facing them in clan battles, why not have ones that are very good?
Yeah, be good at it.
So we've been fortunate enough to collect a few. Grabbed Cable Guy and Feuerja both at the same time was a nice catch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I appreciate it. I think to wrap up the talk about the Immelmann before we go to Sink a Ship, which I'm going to have Borla set up Sink a Ship for you. I guess, Feuerja, my last question would just be, for our listeners who maybe don't have it yet or have not really gotten a chance to check it out, what's the first fundamental thing a Max Immelmann player should do? How do you approach the game when you load into a random? It's like, what's your first step? What do you do, and what's the sequence of events generally in terms of what you should be doing?
I mean, honestly, the first thing that I do every time I load into a random battle is check matchmaking monitor, because how I approach the enemy team is going to be significantly different if there is a Super Unicum Holland player on the other side than if that Holland player has a 45% win rate, probably leaves his AA on and sails in a straight line. And I've had games in an Immelmann where I'll run into that kind of player who thinks that just being in a Holland makes them invincible.
Right.
And they'll be dead in the first 2 minutes. But I think, like I said, Immelmann is very much a cerebral CV to play, and knowing, these are the players, this is their relative skill level, these are the player. If there's a good player in a ship that CVs aren't necessarily good at approaching, the opportunity to attack him, you take it while you can, but you don't try and force it. and just sort of figuring out, what are your targets. Once you have stuff spotted, what are you going to try and focus on? And that is your first approach to pretty much every CV match, but it's certainly, I'd say, more important in an Immelmann than with the other classes or the other ships.
Find who the biggest threats are and take them out.
Or find who the weakest link is and take that out. I'm if you look at the leaderboards and all of the other ships, what you'll see is that I'm usually up there with significantly less damage and more kills than most of the other people on the leaderboard, because I generally identify the weak points being the DDs on the other side rather than what can I get the most damage off of. Because I mean, I think I have a theory, you might agree with it or not, which is that if I as a CV player can take out the enemy contingent of DDs, the game is effectively over.
Right.
As soon as you render them unable to screen torps or approach caps, they've effectively lost that game. And so you're trying to set up situations where you can pick them off. You're farming battleships or cruisers in the meantime, trying to pick up an opportunity, but you're definitely keeping an eye on the little guys to see if you can start getting them off the board as quickly as possible.
Right.
But again, if there's daring players are the worst. I hate those people.
What?
It's smoke to smoke to smoke to smoke, and every time you come near them, they've disappeared again. But like if I'm going up against a very good daring player, they've got 7 smokes in them. They'll be in smoke or shortly away from it for the majority of the game. I don't even send planes their way.
So perhaps, I don't know if that's a lead into the next question that we have for you. If you've heard this show before, we ask each guest that if in their fantasy world they were able to, hey, maybe the wargaming servers are down because of a power outage, and you're there to restore the power, and you can pull out of the database one ship, never to be put back in the game, what ship would you sink?
Mikasa, because I know it would piss you off.
You get out of here right now, sir. I will call the internet police, and they will DDoS you. How dare you?
Wow, the Mikasa. They're already taking the half the pleasure out of the Mikasa game by changing the flag setup so you can't farm 160 flags.
God.
And I actually, I've talked about it before. I do one Mikasa game just about every morning when I drink my coffee, and run into the same dudes half the time. And one of the guys, actually, I referred him to the podcast.
Good.
This week. I don't know if he ever got to listen or not, but I guess some morning in the next week when I bump into him again, I'll be able to find out if he listened to the podcast. But people, a couple of those guys like to give me a hard time for doing a flag farming game or 2 a day.
Sink the Mikasa. Get out of here. You clock out and go home right now, sir. I'm shocked and appalled. Well, Feuerja, it was a pleasure having you on, and I really appreciate you sharing with the audience some insight on how best to utilize the Max Immelmann. We'll obviously be watching closely to see how that develops and see how it works in clan battles. Was there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up here? Either of you?
I'd say we all pretty well covered it from my perspective. Just thank you for having me. It's
a pleasure.
Always a pleasure talking with you guys and teaching people about the craft, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
I just have one reminder for the guys who have not paid attention. There are combat missions right now to get Leroy Jenkins commanders.
That's right.
Yeah, a lot of people may not realize that Leroy Jenkins is not a World of Warcraft meme originally. He was someone who served on the USS Kidd. So right now, for I believe the next 6 days as of today, April 27th, there are combat missions where you can get a historic captain. American ships, the combat missions lead to a 6-point Leroy Jenkins. And if you happen to have the Kidd itself, there's some missions to play the Kidd and get a 10-point Leroy Jenkins captain. And none of them are too hard. The Kidd ones, you have to kind of focus on some certain things, but it's nothing somebody couldn't knock out in a few days if they had a couple hours here and there to play. So if you want some historical captains, or you want a free 10-point or 6-point captains, go check out your combat missions.
Yeah, it is worth pointing out, because the podcast, I have the metrics on it, and we do have a relatively diverse audience in terms of age. So Leroy Jenkins was a real
he's like
guy.
80, yeah, he's like 80. He's still alive.
Still
he's
is. He's alive.
So.
I think he was doing tours on the USS Kidd or something like that as well.
Until I think the last 8 or 10 years, and I understand that if you go visit the Kidd to this day, he's frequently there.
You can hear him down in the hall going, Leroy Jenkins! So most of you who aren't Zoomers might remember the meme from the mid-2000s, I think, of Leroy Jenkins, where I guess the story was that guy had actually done that, where his name was Leroy Jenkins, and they were getting ready for a raid in World of Warcraft, and he was tired of listening to all this stuff, so he just YOLO'd in and screamed Leroy Jenkins and got his whole team killed. And then they thought it was so funny, they set it up and recorded it, so they staged it, and then it went viral of just the notion of, screw this, I'm going in. I'm YOLOing.
It's the generations before their version of Just Send It.
Yeah. Before all of you were eating Tide Pods, Leroy Jenkins was dying for your sins. So
in KSD, they call that a McRendleton.
A McRendleton? Yeah, there you go. So anyway, go check out those things. And Wargaming has an actual article on the website as well about Leroy Jenkins, so go check it out. It's historical stuff is cool and doesn't come out all that often, so go check it out. Other than that, thank you to Feuerja for being our guest today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Borla, for being the best co-host. Appreciate it. And I guess in the next couple of weeks, we're going to try and grab the team, I shouldn't call them clan, the team from KOTS called KSA to come on and talk about, making an upset during KOTS and where they came from and where they're going. And closer to Clan Battle Season 13, we will do a CV main roundtable and talk about a lot of what we just talked about now, but we'll get some other opinions as well. And there's a few other things we have in the works. So in the meantime, please check out my Twitch channel for KOTS coverage. I'd love to see you guys there. It'll be May 1st and 2nd for the group stages, and then the following weekend for the semifinals and finals. And then KOTS International is after that. So hopefully we'll see you guys there. Other than that, thank you all for listening. This has been Get to Know World of Warships.